Hi everyone! In the second part of the video, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of technical mechanical issues that you need to be aware of in your secondary source integration. So the first issue I wanted to talk about was in-text citations, because you're going to need to cite all of the sources that you use within your secondary source integration. So we've already talked about how to put together a works cited page when we worked on the annotated bibliography. Now I want to talk a little bit about how to handle in-text citations. Remember that you want to have citations at 2 points within the document. You want to have the fuller reference with all of the information in the works cited page, but you also want to have in-text citations at the moment where you use the particular words or ideas from the source. And in both cases, you want to make sure that you're using MLA 8. Now, I might seem to be really pedantic and nitpicky and ridiculous for insisting that you use MLA 8 and you get those citations correct. There is, however, a really important reason to make sure that you're using an up-to-date version of MLA and you're getting those citations correct. Think about your ethos as an academic. Part of that ethos comes from knowing the conventions and using them correctly. It just shows that you know how someone in your field works, that you're up to date with the conventions of your field, that you know exactly what is going on at the moment. If you use an incorrect citation style, if your citation style is out of date, it compromises your ethos. It makes people wonder whether you're keeping up with developments as well as you should. So for that reason, I'm really wanting you to look impressive. I'm wanting you to be able to impress people after this course. So that's why I am insisting on you getting the citations right and getting them up to date. So I'm going to talk you through a few basics of in-text citations, but remember that you have the Purdue OWL available to you. If you go to the link, which I'll put up on Carmen, you'll see a style guide that will look something like this. To find more information about the in-text citations, you'll want to click on this menu in the left. You'll see it'll cover the basic rules, it'll give you some examples, and it'll talk about how you can handle some tricky situations. So I'm covering the basics in this particular presentation. If you want more complex information, if you want to know how to handle tricky situations, look at that Purdue style guide. It'll be really, really helpful to you. So, in-text citations are generally pretty straightforward. There are two situations that you need to be aware of. The first situation is where you have the author's name in a sentence leading up to the quote. So where you've incorporated a little phrase introducing the quote, saying exactly who's responsible for it. So in this particular example, I want to use a quote from David Crystal's book on language and the internet. I can choose to introduce my quote and use Crystal's name. So David Crystal provides a definition of the internet. The internet is an association of computer networks with common standards which enable messages to be sent from any registered computer on one network to any host on any other. Since I've provided Crystal's name in the sentence leading up to the quote, I only need to give the page number at the end. If, however, I don't have a sentence leading up to the quote, if I don't provide Crystal's name, if I just move straight into the quote, I then need to provide Crystal's name in the parenthesis after the quote. So I would have his name and his page number. Now, I'm sure some of you can think of situations where you won't necessarily have the author's name, where you won't necessarily have the page number. That's going to be the case with certain web pages that you use. To find out how to deal with those situations, I again want to direct you to the Purdue OWL guide. It's going to tell you how to cover them. So, ultimately, think about your citations as using a kind of double entry system. You have a short in-text citation at the point where you use the words or ideas in your paper, and that in-text citation basically exists then to direct your reader to the fuller, more informative citation in your works cited page. So by giving the author's last name here, your readers are then able to look it up in your works cited page, which should of course be in alphabetical order, and get everything else they need to track down the text. If you have any questions about this, either check out that Purdue guide I've pointed to you to at a couple of times, or else absolutely feel free to email me or ask me a question on the Common Discussion forums. I want you to be getting this right. Okay, the second technical or mechanical issue I want to talk about is basically how to have a conversation with your sources. So whenever you use a source, you need to say something about it. You should never leave a source to speak for itself. And you have various options for how to do that. You can explain what the source means. You can explain why it's useful for your purposes. You can explain what its implications are for your analysis or claims. Or if you find that the source isn't exactly doing what you wanted to or needed to, you can explain why it's wrong or limited. Whatever you do with the source, though, it's often useful to think about putting quotes or paraphrases from the source in what I like to call a quote sandwich. So if you look at this image over here, you can get a sense of what a quote sandwich involves. So whenever you use a quotation, you want to sandwich it between a statement introducing the quotation and some sort of explanation following it. So let's look at an example of how that would appear for that quote from Crystal. So we have the quote here that I read earlier. The internet is an association of computer networks, blah, blah, blah. To put that quote within a sandwich, we'd have a statement introducing it. David Crystal provides a standard definition of the internet. And then we'd follow it with an explanation, some sort of commentary on it, some sort of discussion of it. So in this case, my explanation or discussion is that Crystal defines the internet purely in terms of its physical, technological infrastructure, yet we might ask whether the internet should be viewed in more personal, human terms. So I'm giving an explanation of what his definition involves, and I'm also pointing to some limitations within it. Presumably then, after this, I'd go on to talk about my own claim that the internet should be viewed in more personal, human terms. Now, it's useful to think of this quote sandwich because it always ensures that your reader has some sort of context for the quote. You aren't just dropping it into your paper. And it also makes sure that you're discussing it in some way. You aren't simply leaving it to speak for itself. So whenever you use material from a source, try and turn it into a quote sandwich. Again, if you have any questions or concerns about this, please ask me. Okay, so that's all I have for you at the moment. Good luck with your SSI, and please let me know if there's anything I can do to help.